ingenuity, industry and technology. The Scandinavians, particularly the Swedes, are living proof that rapid urbanization can work hand in hand with nature, such as turning waste into wealth. The Dutch, on the other hand, have had 20 million people living side by side with the North Sea. In rapidly developing flood-prone Southeast Asia, what can we draw and learn from the best? Find out from the experts at Slick. Book now.
Hello, I'm Chef Hari. We're now live from the Smart Living and Innovation Caucus 2018, or SLIC 2018, where we have the best minds in innovation and sustainable living under one roof here in Kuala Lumpur. And among issues raised here in SLIC 2018 are how we can live in symbiosis with the nature, and how, in the name of development, we should work together, not against the Mother Earth. So, we are learning from the best minds from all around the world about sustainability, about flood mitigation, so on and so forth, from all around the country. We have the best minds from all around the country, including Mr. Eric Jan Pleijster, who just came, he just landed here in KL about 45 minutes ago. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
All right. And Eric Jan Pleijster is a co-founder of LOLA Architect based in the Netherlands. And LOLA is the abbreviation for Lost Landscape, where their mission is to turn lost landscape into rich, vivid, beautiful spaces with huge public and commercial utility. Well, if you've been to Rotterdam or you've been to Amsterdam, you know what it means. But let us just take a step backwards and try to understand. The key term here is progressive landscape architecture. So what is it all about? Number one. Number two, when did the people of Netherlands and the government of Netherlands realize the potential of progressive landscape architecture?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me here. Progressive landscape architecture. It's the way we define landscape architecture in the Netherlands is basically the design of all the public space outside the building. Mm-hmm. So where the public space begins, it's part of landscape architecture. Mm-hmm. What does it make progressive? It's actually trying to look for solutions for certain problems that we have. So it's not just laying out a carpet of stone or asphalt or grass or green. No, it's actually landscape architecture that tries to solve problems when it comes to water management or biodiversity or sustainability, or just creating really nice public spaces that are not generic but are unique. And I think this is a really important aspect of Dutch landscape architecture.
Among problems you have in Amsterdam is the city itself is below sea level, and you have a stormy Northern Sea, waters from Northern Sea rushing into Amsterdam, and 50 years ago, 60 years ago, you have a lot of floods. And then you came out with new technology, the dikes technology, and from there you realize space for agriculture and habitation. Or what actually had spurred the moment for the people of the people of the Netherlands to actually do this?
Yeah. Well, in a way, you're right. The Netherlands is, for the half of the Netherlands is lying below the sea level. And the most deep point in the Netherlands is actually 7 meters below sea level. And already, I think, not just 50 years ago, but even 700 years before Christ, people already started making dikes. And they started making little dikes to protect themselves from the water, whether it's from the sea or from the river, because the river is also dangerous, as you would also know. And so progressively they started to make this water defense system, slowly trying to push the conditions of the sea and the ocean out. But then in the 50s, 1953, there was the last big disaster when the dikes actually broke, and a lot of people died, and there was like a very substantial economical disaster also. And at that point people said, okay, no more, we don't want this no more. And there was a big plan developed, together also with large investments, of course, from the state, to make a new system of dams and dikes around the Netherlands, trying to actually block the sea forever, which, when you look at the number of death people ever since, has been highly successful, because for over 60 years, no person got harmed because of flooding, which is, I think, it's a huge success, of course. But it never stopped there, you know. After this, the development and the building and the construction of this big plan and all these dikes, people also continuously every year work on the water management and water safety of the Netherlands. So this is like big maintenance plans, but also the development of it's ongoing. That's what I'm saying. So because in the Netherlands, people basically turned the water notion around. Instead of reacting on a disaster and evacuating people, they're trying to prevent a disaster from happening.
In countries like Malaysia, it needs a political will in its policy to be set up to facilitate a process like this. Do you have that in Netherlands?
Yeah, true. Yes, yes. So this is, I think, a key moment in history where the politicians turned things around, said no more disasters. In the notion also that the benefit, the cost of preventing a flood, is lower than the cost for repairing damage. So repairing damage, evacuating people, constructing new houses is more costly than preventing it. But this also, of course, this you have to put in your mind that, you know, by being successful, no disasters happen anymore, but you still need to invest. So that's I think, what is part of the big success of the Netherlands and its water management.
And among other problems which happened many years ago in Netherlands is the car incident, which then turned Netherlands into the cycling nations, and how the government the government of Netherlands had ensure or make it easy for everyone to cycle. So this needs policy and this needs political will. And it's not just this. We also, I've been to Netherlands, I've been to Amsterdam and Rotterdam, and I can see a lot of spaces, empty spaces, were turned into commercial and habitation spaces, new spaces. So we want to talk about this, how we can implement all this best practices from the Netherlands to cities like Kuala Lumpur or Jakarta. So we're going to take a short break and we'll come back to see after this. Welcome back to 100 Hari or 100 Days New Malaysia. 100 Hari Malaysia Baharu. I'm Chef Johari here at the Smart Living and Innovation Caucus of SLIC 2018. We're still with the co-founder of LOLA Architecture, Eric John Pleijster, and we talk about the best practices of the Netherlands and how we can implement all these sustainability practices here in this part of the world. And among the when I was in Netherlands, when I was in Amsterdam, I was, as a tourist, I just wandered around, ride a bicycle, and then took a ferry across the waterways, and then I just discovered this former. It's a space, an empty space. I think it's there was a lot of empty factories. I believe it was a former industrial area, but you get to see a lot of cool places, cool cafes, and they have this one. There's a small boutique hotel where it uses crane, and they turn cranes into hotel rooms. I see it as a good way of how you could redevelop space and utilizing it for other purpose. All right. Is this one of the many examples, or is this the only example you have in Amsterdam? Can you share a bit?
No, this is a good example. It's called the NDSM-werf, and it's a redevelopment of an old piece of the harbor. And why this redevelopment is going on is because the Netherlands is a very small country. There's 17 million people living, but the size is not too big, which means that space itself is a limited resource. So we want to reserve as much space as possible for landscape, for agriculture, for forest, for biodiversity, for water management. All this is very important to have a more sustainable society. Which means for the city that we don't want cities to keep on expanding, you know, eating up more space for urban developments. We actually want cities to redevelop their shipyards, redevelop their city cores, redevelop their infrastructure in a way that old lost landscapes, as we call them, get to be transformed into new experiences. And this goes for instance, the harbor in Amsterdam, but also the harbor in Rotterdam. And the nice thing about it is that while retaining or keeping the original atmosphere of the cranes and of the industry and of the cage, you actually get a new kind of experience that you can really well commercially also exploit, of course, in a way. So it's like 1 + 1. It's not tearing everything down and building something new. No, it's redeveloping. So it's keeping the characteristics, building something new in a sustainable way.
What was it? Is it enabled the redevelopment of northern Amsterdam, the area which I stumbled upon accidentally? Was it done due to the change of legislation or new policy, or it was fully supported or fully driven by private sector?
Yes, exactly. No, the private sector is doing very well in these days. You have to understand that 10 years ago, the private sector was actually still buying large plots of land outside the city to build kind of generic housing areas that we don't want anymore. Now the private sector has also discovered the city, and they're buying these old shipyards, old industrial areas, and they are actually very well in transforming these spaces. So I'm quite proud of the private sector. They're quite honorable and visionary.
What had driven the effort by the private sector to actually take a further step or proactive step to do this? You know, it would be easier for us to actually open up new space. We have greenfield and we have brownfield. And brownfield will be a bit more difficult to redevelop, isn't it?
Yeah. I think even though it gets more difficult, and it's maybe even more expensive as well, because it's more cheap to tear something down and build something new than to redevelop. But in the end, the benefit is higher because the sustainability is higher. And even the private sector also sees this, and it's very good for their identity also. So their identity as responsible developers, responsible builders. Plus the attractivity of these kind of spaces, you know, keeping the old characteristics, redeveloping it, is much higher than, well, generic places. And this is also, I think, for me, this is also in the core of what my office is actually doing. So the meaning of LOLA being lost landscapes, one is, you know, the redevelopment of landscapes, not only urban, but also rural landscapes. And the other one is getting lost. You know, it's like getting a new experience. You know all about it. If people get lost, if people have unique experiences, they will remember a landscape or a city forever. It will stay in their mind, and landscape architecture can be a tool in achieving this goal.
Well, after all, traveling is all about getting lost.
Yes.
And then you get to learn a lot more about that. And we have to take another short break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about housing, because in Malaysia, for instance, 70% of our population lives in city, and we have, you know, issues with accommodating such a huge population and making sure everyone has roof under their head. So we're gonna take a short break, and when we come back, we're gonna address the issue. We're now still at the Smart Living and Innovation Caucus, or SLIC 2018, and now we're at the third block. Mr. Eric, when we talk about housing and commercial areas, cities like Kuala Lumpur, where 70% of all of this nation population are living in the cities, and this is not just a unique case. You have the same issues in Jakarta, for instance, or in Vietnam, Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City. So there's a need for not just sustainable but also cheap housing and commercial area, and at the same time, like the government of Malaysia, we've promised the United Nations to make sure that we achieve the sustainable development goals, so on and so forth. How we can actually tick all these boxes?
I think I don't really have an answer on the cheap. So I'm not a developer myself. My guess would be, to create housing that's also very flexible. What we see in the Netherlands is that in order to have buildings that you can reuse in the future, you have to, build in a smart way so that you can actually change the function and the inside in the future of this building. So the casco, the framework, needs to be very flexible. But I do think that what we are going to see in the future is that people in big cities also will start relying on the landscape of the surroundings much more, which means that living quite close and next to nature will be much more important for weekend recreation, for doing sports. And this can be done in relatively cheap housing, but which means that the context of this housing, the landscape, will be more important. And this is going on, I think, on a worldwide scale. For instance, we're doing a project in Shenzhen in China, and that's where we're on the edge of the ever-expanding city. We're actually trying to build big parks right now in order for people to give them a sustainable way of living, which is not only about energy, biodiversity, but it's also about sporting, moving, and just getting outside and rewarding yourself with nature, basically. So you can go into a shopping mall and reward yourself with luxury, but in the future people will start moving to this natural aspect much more. Yeah.
It's going to be a change in mindset.
I think it will be a change in mindset, and I think it will be, because let's be fair, we cannot just live in cities. We need nature to kind of like reload our inner battery, and well, that also means that we need to take care of nature, of course.
The challenge is when you move city, or when you move the people of the city to the edge of the city, like your project in Shenzhen, while ensuring there's no jeopardy towards the Mother Earth or the nature.
Personally, I'm a true believer of that there's no conflict between the culture, the city, and nature. For me, I think it's perfectly possible to merge the two systems into each other and to have, for instance, a city where nature plays a big role. Let's talk about rooftops for a moment. When I was driving through Jakarta, I saw all these flat rooftops on top of buildings. Being now useless space, being now just flat, and maybe there's a solar panel on top of it. But when all these rooftops would have green rooftops, that would mean that you can actually store water there, that you can isolate your building, lower cost on heating the building, and that you also have a place for biodiversity, attracting insects, birds, small animals. So for me, living with nature is not only about protecting Mother Earth, but it's living together with nature. There is no, if you treat each other right, there is no conflict.
All right. What will be your next landscape project? Be in Asia?
Well, for me, my mission is repairing lost landscapes. And I've seen that a lot of landscapes can be actually repaired. Due to rapid urban growth, a lot of the context, the countryside, has been neglected and also fairly often used for mining, used for cutting wood, used for palm oil plantations, etc. So for me, there's a big mission in repairing these landscapes into a more natural state, but also combined with housing, recreation, and, well, basically the good life.
All right, I know you've just been here in Malaysia for the last, 2-3 hours? All right, let's say, given the opportunity for you to participate in the redevelopment of cities in Kuala Lumpur, how do you foresee yourself? How could you play an important role here?
Well, I think one of the reasons that I'm here right now is also to just inspire. And for me, that is basically a start. To inspire people, to motivate them to look different to the assets, to their green assets, to what a city could be, and in this way try to establish also cooperations. I think that's just, if I can reach 1 or 2 persons who think, okay, we can, build our future in a different way, then this is a nice start for me, and the goal is already
it will be a great start for everyone.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you very much, Hari Pleijster, co-founder of LOLA Architecture, a company based in the Netherlands, where it focused on the progressive landscape architecture, and it has projects of course, in Netherlands as well as in other countries such as China. Maybe you would like to bid in one project here in Kuala Lumpur?
That would be really nice.
All right. That's all for today here from the Smart Living and Innovation Caucus. We're going to continue our discussion tomorrow here at Stratos Hari Malaysia Baharu. Until then, I'm Shafizan Johari. Thank you for watching.
Ingenuity, industry, and technology. The Scandinavians, particularly the Swedes, are living proof that rapid urbanization can work hand in hand with nature, such as turning waste into wealth. The Dutch, on the other hand, have had 20 million people living side by side with the North Sea. In rapidly developing flood-prone Southeast Asia, what can we draw and learn from the best? Find out from the experts at Slick. Book now.